It is 6 a.m. in Bogota. A man puts a green backpack, gets on a bicycle, and rides towards the city center. Not to make a delivery, but to stand in a line. Someone across the town needs a government document and does not want to lose 3 hours to the queue. So they paid a stranger to lose them instead. That's not a food delivery app. That's an app for a country where the infrastructure itself is broken. And someone decided to just deliver around it. This is Rappy, and by the end, I want you to sit with one uncomfortable idea. The entire company works because the country does not. Let's put the scale on the table: 35 million active users, 9 countries, more than 400 cities, $3.8 billion dollars in gross merchandise value in a single quarter, and after nearly a decade of being written off as a cash burning machine, 4 straight profitable quarters. Founded in 2015, $2.46 billion dollars raised, an IPO targeted for 2026, Colombia's first unicorn did not just survive, it compounded. To understand the company, you have to understand one belief its founder never let go of. Borrero and Sebastian were high school friends. They had built a grocery app called Grability that scaled across Latin America, Asia, and Europe. They learned how commerce actually moves in cities Silicon Valley never designed for, and Borrero took away a conviction that sounds obvious and almost nobody acts on. The problems everyone else flees are the market, the bad addresses, the cash economy, the chaos. That is not the reason not to build, that is the thing to build on. In 2015, in Colombia, they launched Rappi. The first version was barely an app. You'd message them anything you wanted, and a courier would go get it. The product was not delivery, the product was a person. By 2018, they were the first unicorn ever built by Colombians. Hold on to that belief. The problems are the market because it explains every decision that comes next. Most people call Rappi the DoorDash of Latin America. The comparison gets the category right and misses the point entirely. DoorDash delivers food into infrastructure that already works: banks, addresses, roads. Delivery is a convenience layer on a functioning city. Rappi is the opposite of that. Look at what it is actually built on top of: millions of homes with no formal postal addresses. So GPS pinned couriers became the delivery network. Over half the population with no bank account, so cash on delivery wasn't a feature, it was survival. Cities so gridlocked, a 3 kilometer errand eats 45 minutes. So time itself became the thing people would pay to reclaim it, and a vast informal workforce with no other work. So courier supply was effectively unlimited. Each of those is a problem. Stacked together, they are a moat. Rapid does not sit on top of the infrastructure, it substitutes for the parts that don't exist. The product was never delivery, it was friction removal. And when a country's addresses, banks, and roads are broken all at once, the friction is enormous and it is a market only a local founder could see. Once you can send a person to do one thing, you can send a person to do everything. That is the single idea that became a dozen businesses. Look at what anything actually became. Every one of these is ridiculous in San Francisco and essential in Medellin. Rapid favor, send a person to do anything, and people used it for exactly that: hold my place in the passport line, pick up my prescription, wait for the technician so I don't miss a day's wages. In a city where a queue can cost you half a working day, outsourcing the wait isn't lazy, it is rational. Rapicash, An ATM that comes to you. In cities where withdrawing money at a machine is mugging risk, that's a safety product. RappiPay and RappiCard, a wallet and credit for people who have never had either, backed by an actual banking license in Colombia. Turbo, 10-minute delivery from Rappi owned dark stores, one of quick commerce first movers in a market that actually needed it. Rappi Travel, book flights and hotels in the same app you order anything from. And Rappi Prime, the subscription that binds it all together, that's the mechanism that turns a delivery app into a daily habit. Here is why the anything strategy isn't as random as it looks. The super app playbook goes in one direction. Delivery gives people a reason to open the app every single day. Every day creates payment volume. Payment volume justifies a wallet. A wallet unlocks credit, insurance, travel, banking. Delivery, then habit, then money. Nobody starts by launching the bank. They earn their way down to it, win the daily open, and everything else compounds from there. That is the flywheel. And in 2019, someone with $100 billion fund looked at Latin America and decided it was time. Masayoshi Son bet over $1 billion that Latin America was about to inflect. Son had already run this playbook twice, WeChat in China, Gojek across Southeast Asia. The pattern was always the same. Find 600 million plus people who are young, urban, mobile first, and underbanked, and bet that whoever captures the daily habit captures everything downstream: payments, credit, commerce, all of it. Latin America fit the template. So in 2019, SoftBank led a round north of $1 billion. But that kind of capital isn't patient, it comes with a clock. The number on that clock is now a year 2026, an IPO window that has to prove the whole thesis was real. Everything from here runs against that deadline. The entire question is which version of the story Latin America turns out to be. And here is the complication SoftBank's valuation glossed over. SoftBank priced this as a single continental platform. But here is what the pitch deck glossed over: the continent does not cooperate. Because the continent doesn't cooperate, nine countries means nine regulators, nine sets of labor laws, nine banking regimes. A fintech license in Colombia means nothing in Brazil. Nine economies with different currencies, inflation, cash to card ratios. What is profitable in Chile can bleed money in Argentina. And nine competitive battlefields: iFood in Brazil, Uber everywhere, local players in every city. The super app has to win all of them at once on the same balance sheet before that 2026 clock runs out. Remember the man from the opening? 6 a.m. green backpack riding towards a line. Multiply him by hundreds of thousands. That's the delivery network, and it's built on top of a migration crisis. Colombia has taken in more than 1.3 million Venezuelans fleeing economic collapse. For a lot of them, the only work available was a bicycle and a green Rappi backpack. The gig model didn't create that desperation, but it absorbed it at scale. One courier working roughly 15 hours a day put it plainly. You really have to devote tons of time to do this to make any decent money. And yet, talk to them and you also hear pride. It's real income earned in a new country on their own hours when nothing else was on offer. That's the tension the whole business sits on. The same job is both a lifeline and a trap. Hold both of those in your head because the company has to. That is where the model meets its hardest problem. One word carries all the weight: partners, not employees. The couriers want to be recognized as employees with social security, healthcare, safety protocols. They have filed two formal complaints. They have staged repeated one day strikes. But the model needs the opposite. Look at the cost per delivery. The gig rate is the baseline, the whole flywheel is priced on. Add benefits, and that bar jumps. Classify couriers as employees across nine countries, and the entire model is priced on falls apart. Rappi did not cause the Venezuela's collapse, but its unit economics depend on the aftermath. Hundreds of thousands of people for whom this is the only income available. The gig model in a country with a safety net is convenience debate. In a country without one, the same model becomes a different model equation, and regulators in multiple markets are starting to do the maths. For a decade, the knock on Rappi was that it burned cash to buy growth it could never make pay. Then something changed, and the unprofitable super app quietly turned the corner. Four consecutive profitable quarters with positive EBITDA, a revenue base north of $1.5 billion, according to its IPO filing. Management now reinvesting 100% of profits and saying it doesn't need new private funding, and an IPO target for 2026, right on clock. SoftBank started. Then in September 2025, Amazon arrived, a $25 million convertible note carrying warrants for up to 12% of the company. The business everyone wrote off as structurally unprofitable is now the one with a queue of people waiting on. But here's the question profitability doesn't answer. Is anything a deliberate strategy or the product of a company that hasn't been forced to choose yet? The sharpest way to frame it, WeChat earned the right to be everything by first becoming one indispensable thing. Payments won, then everything else just rode that trail. Rappi is attempting the opposite, launching a dozen services across 9 countries in the hope that one of them becomes the rail. That is not the same bet. It's building the infrastructure and running the trains on it simultaneously before knowing which track actually goes somewhere. Or maybe the ambiguity is the point. In markets where the problem itself is undefined, anything might be the only honest strategy there is. Three plausible futures for the Everything app. Scenario 1, the IPO lands, 2026 listing works, profitability holds, and Rappi becomes the first Latin America born super app to reach public space. Scenario B, Amazon absorbs it. That convertible note becomes a foothold. Amazon buys the distribution it never managed to build in the region, and Rappi becomes a region rather than a company. Scenario C, the one nobody models, spread too thin. A wave of labor rulings pushes the cost floor up. Every one of those 9 markets pulls attention the others are already starving for, and a company that promised to do everything ends up being trusted with nothing. 650 million people, one broken continent, that's not just the market size, it is the reason every single Rappi product exists. Because Rappi built a business that only works because the country does not, every product cash to your door, a person in the queue, a wallet for the unbanked, is a patch over a gap the state left open. Which raises the question no pitch deck answers. What happens to do to the Everything app when the infrastructure finally catches up? Is Rappi building the future of Latin American commerce or just monetizing the delay before it arrives? Three things to carry out of this. One, the dysfunction is the defensibility. Rappi's moat isn't technology, it is that its product only makes sense in a context that's genuinely hard to replicate. Whatever your market refuses to fix, that is where the uncopyable products hide. Two, a super app without an anchor is just an app store. WeChat won payments first. Then everything else followed. If you can't name the single behavior your whole stack rides on, anything is a positioning problem, not a strategy. And third, the workforce is part of the product, not a cost line. Rapid's network runs on a migration crisis it did not cause but does rely on. If your unit economics rest on someone else's precarity, that's not an externality to disclaim. It's a risk with a due date sitting right there on the roadmap. Somewhere in Bogota, it's 6 a.m. again. The man with the green backpack is already riding towards a line. They didn't deliver food, they delivered a workaround for an entire continent, and they're still pedaling to keep it running.